killing of 3 United States troops in Jordan by groups the Pentagon had said were Iran-backed is heightening pressure on the Biden administration to balance their message back to Tehran with the goal of deterring future attacks but not escalating a broader conflict.
The attack on the U.S. troops is the first time American service members have been killed in the Middle East since the outbreak of the conflict in Gaza. National Security spokesperson John Kirby weighed in on the Jordan attack yesterday, saying the Biden administration does not desire another war, but will respond to these attacks.
We do not seek another war. We do not seek to escalate. But we will absolutely do what is required to protect ourselves, to continue that mission, and to respond appropriately to these attacks. We will respond. We'll do that on our schedule, in our time.
Joining us now to weigh in is retired Lieutenant Colonel and host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, Daniel Davis. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
I wonder if first you can help us understand what the constructive difference is between responding, as John Kirby says the United States will do, and escalating in a way that could lead to a broader war.
Well, it's semantics. It's basically trying to thread the needle and trying to be partially pregnant or so, which is really hard to do. Because, it's escalation and appropriateness is always in the eye of the beholder. Of course, Iran is going to say anything that we do is not appropriate because they're claiming, well, it wasn't us. We didn't do it. We don't direct them, et cetera. Whether they did or whether they didn't is nearly irrelevant because it matters what the American people think and what the president thinks, because he's going to act on what he believes we're supposed to do. Now, it is clear that there is a significant pressure on the White House, which has been predictable, and I've been saying it, I think, on your show several times over the last several months, that if an American was killed, there would be huge pressure for him to strike Iran, at Iranian targets, not just at the militia groups that may have pulled this off, and now that's where we are. Now, the problem is if Biden goes in soft again and doesn't do any of these, a big strike, then people are going to call him weak, and it's probably going to encourage more people to do the same. But if he goes in too heavy, then he could literally draw us into a war that nobody wants to fight in America, and probably nobody even on the Iranian side, but that's where it may end up. That's why I think the best policy is probably one of the least pleasant ones, but the best one for the U.S., and that is to finally withdraw our troops from these pointless and unnecessary deployments, which ironically the White House had leaked some information a week ago that they were considering doing this, and now, of course, no one even wants to talk about that. But that's what would eliminate our vulnerability and keep any more American troops from getting killed. But I'm sorry, I will say one last thing there. It is absolutely now required that the president does go after and destroy any of these groups that actually carried this attack out. That's non-negotiable.
Yes, I saw Senator Rand Paul saying on Twitter that perhaps we should reevaluate a policy that stations a few hundred soldiers in dozens of remote areas in dozens of countries, not enough to fight a real war, just enough to be vulnerable targets. Could you speak to, what is from the administration's perspective, what is the purported national security reason for having handfuls of troops stationed in unsafe situations across Africa and the Middle East where they could be fired upon by terrorist groups, militia groups, rebel groups? What are they doing there from the U.S. government's perspective that would be worth that risk?
I love the way you phrase that question because it gets to the heart of the truth of the matter. But the administration has been falling all over itself to keep on claiming this fiction that we're there on a counter-ISIS mission, that we're trying for the enduring defeat of ISIS. They love that phrase. I've seen it from the Secretary of Defense. I've seen it from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I've seen it from the Pentagon official releases and people in the White House. But Kirby keeps saying it over and over and over. It's not true. That's like saying we're trying to drain a swimming pool with an eyedropper in a rainstorm. It ain't going to happen. You may take out one or two people here, but it'll never eliminate the troops. And look, we've had 2 decades of time to see in Afghanistan and Iraq that you can't eliminate and wipe them out. And it's certainly not with a handful of troops, as you just pointed out, in little dots on the map. They're not doing anything but protecting themselves and being points of vulnerability. So what we should be doing is withdrawing those troops out of these pointless little dots where it's really hard to defend them and reposition them in places, even in the Middle East, to where there's more places where we can defend them. So what that will do is it'll remove the vulnerability. It will make it harder for these Iran-backed groups to even attack us, and it will preserve all of our ability to defend American interest and American vital national security interests throughout the region. That's what we should do, but unfortunately, all anyone's talking about is let's bomb Iran.
Well, if, as you say, it's nearly impossible to eliminate various groups because of the nature of how dispersed they are in the region, guerrilla, non-official armies and the like. And given the ambiguity around who actually conducted the attack that ended in the death of these 3 troops, what is the wisdom then of you having just said that it's necessary that America have a response? Is it possible for America to have a response that is constructive, substantive, targeted, and actually addressing the people who committed the killings against these troops, the drone strike against these troops, in this kind of information unclear scenario? That does not just risk more escalation. I think that our intelligence
is able to find out who actually did it. And I completely agree with what you said. I think that is absolutely the right thing. The people who killed American troops should be held accountable and be responsible and be destroyed. And we should kill them. I don't have any question about that. But then the next question is, then what? And that's one of the big problems I have with a lot of these people talking about how they should go in heavy with Iran and hit these other groups, et cetera. They don't talk about what next. Because if you don't move any of these troops that are there right now, then, as Robbie just said, they remain points of vulnerability. It remains easy access for these Iran-backed groups. And that's what drives me crazy, is that no one wants to take away the difficulty for the Iranian side. If you don't like the Iranian side, you should make it harder for them to attack America, not keep it easy as it is right now. So it's got to be a combination of striking the people that hit us so nobody's in confusion that they can get away with killing an American, but also let's not make it easy on the bad guys.
So how would you respond to demands I'm seeing from some top members of Congress, including, I believe, Senator John Cornyn and Senator Lindsey Graham, who Representative Dan Crenshaw, all counseled an immediate strike on Iran, on Tehran itself, drawing some criticism from other figures on the right, including Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. What would happen if we immediately attacked Iran itself?
The probability of a broader war that we get sucked into would be off the charts. It would be way high. And that's what really, I'll just be honest, annoys me when I hear these people talk. Now, Crenshaw should frankly know better. He had some military experience, but some of these others, they don't see, especially Lindsey Graham, seems to have no concept of what his words would mean on the ground. Because if you go and you hit Iran, or look, Iran just showed they're not going to sit passive by. They weren't passive when we assassinated Soleimani in 2020. They had pinpoint strikes on an American base in Al-Assad and wounded 100 Americans. They have recently attacked targets in Iraq, in Syria, in Pakistan, in retaliation for things that they claim happened to them. They will not be passive. So if you go and you hit them, or if you take out Soleimani, which actually I've heard some other people suggest here recently, shockingly, that's an act of war, and they're going to retaliate. So you have to answer me, all these people, what next? What if they don't get deterred like you hope they would, and instead they escalate and hit even more Americans, and now they're not 3 are dead, but now 30 are dead, or 300 if it gets into a war? Then what are you going to do? That's what they have to answer to me.
And Colonel, just so we don't jump the gun, yesterday a national security spokesperson, when questioned, seemed to acknowledge that they didn't have any evidence tying this attack to Iran. Have there been any updates? What evidence exists to suggest that Iran was behind this?
Well, I think Ms. Singh said it in one of those interviews. You know, they believe and have a lot of evidence that Iran is supporting them. And they have been, whether it's the Houthis or some of these Kataib Hezbollah itself in Lebanon, et cetera, that they provide a lot of the training, the ammunition, support, et cetera, just on a regular basis. So indirectly, almost for sure that they were associated with it, but there's no evidence that they actually directed it like this is what they want to do. I think that's one of the misconceptions that a lot of people think that you know, Tehran is like a puppet master and all these are just strings on their fingers. And I don't think they have that much control. They probably wish they did, but I don't think they do. But it is true that they are responsible for enabling these people, and I'm sure that they're happy to see them attack Americans. But the bigger issue for us is that it's in America's vital national interest to avoid unnecessary, pointless wars that would drain our resources and result in more American deaths for a war that we do not need to fight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my follow-up would just be that by extension of that logic, one could say that because America overwhelmingly supplies military aid to any number of countries, but in this instance, Israel, that any actions that Israel then takes, or let's say if it is found to be committing a genocide by the ICJ or any other international court, that any rebuke to Israel, whether through international diplomacy or people fighting a war in response to Israel's actions, could easily say that America is a justifiable target, regardless if it endorsed any specific policy of Israel. And maybe that's right, but that does seem to be the kind of parallel that we're describing here, does it not?
Well, there's certainly many non-Americans who come to that conclusion all the time, and Russia being the first one, because you know we're supplying Ukraine. Ukraine is killing Russian soldiers. Ergo, from them, that makes us responsible. You won't find anybody on Capitol Hill that would follow that logic, just because it's self-serving not to. But it's hard to ignore the parallels that you're talking about there, and frankly, they are what they are.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Always my pleasure, Robbie. Thanks for having me.